Step back in time to 2023 New Haven, where a heart-wrenching story unfolds in the prestigious halls of Eastwood University. When societal expectations clash with raw talent, a young woman faces the unthinkable, being judged and dismissed by an elite academic world. Every face in the room says you don't belong. Every whisper doubts your worth, and your biggest competitor just sabotaged you. Yet you still walk out with the trophy in your hand. This isn't a movie script. It's a true-to-life inspired story about how one girl from Oakwood, California, stunned the entire Ivy League, exposed a scandal, and rewrote the rules of belonging at Eastwood. Stick around till the end, because the way she turned the tables on everyone is something you'll never forget. And hey, before we dive in, if you love stories about resilience, underdogs, and moments that shake the system, hit that subscribe button and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support keeps these powerful stories coming week after week. Who let you in here? The question sliced through the room like a blade, dripping with both sarcasm and contempt. The voice belonged to Brandon Rivers, the golden boy of Eastwood's National Debate Invitational. Tall, poised, and dressed in a tailored navy blazer, he was every bit the Ivy League poster child. His smirk widened as he looked over the girl standing awkwardly at the back of the lecture hall. Now imagine this. A nationwide competition had brought the country's brightest young debaters to Eastwood University. Among polished private school students from the Upper East Side, the suburbs of San Francisco, and the prep schools of Boston stood Chloe Hayes, 17 years old, from the Oakwood Heights neighborhood. Her sneakers were scuffed, her blazer second-hand, and her accent a slow, honey-dipped southern drawl that many in the room had already decided to mock. She clutched her faded notebook to her chest as whispers darted like arrows across the room. Is she even on the list? Did admissions make a mistake? I thought this was an invitational, not open mic night. Chloe heard every word, but she kept her gaze steady on the front stage, where the event coordinator, Professor Eleanor Vance, stood organizing the speaker schedule. Professor Vance, renowned for her cutthroat critiques and her famously impossible-to-impress demeanor, surveyed the room with practiced indifference. Her eyes briefly flicked toward Chloe, pausing just long enough to register her presence and perhaps her lack of pedigree. The first day was meant to be icebreakers and warm-up rounds. Students mingled, forming informal practice groups. Names were being exchanged, resumes compared like battle scars from academic wars long fought. Chloe stood alone by the window, tracing the worn edges of her debate journal. Every page was filled with handwritten speeches, rebuttal techniques, and late-night notes her mother had helped her draft after long shifts at the diner. Her mother's words rang in her head even now. You don't have to outrest them, baby. Just outthink them. Suddenly Brandon's voice boomed again. Hey, Professor. Are we taking community volunteers this year? He laughed, eliciting chuckles from his inner circle. Chloe inhaled deeply, fighting the flush creeping up her neck. Before she could respond, Professor Vance's voice cut through the laughter. That's enough, Mr. Rivers. The room fell silent. A few heads turned, eyebrows raised. Brandon gave a theatrical bow, pretending to be chastised, but the damage had been done. Chloe's face burned, but her spine remained straight. Later that afternoon, in the main lecture hall, Professor Vance began outlining the first debate topic for tomorrow's elimination round. Resolved, the role of socioeconomic background in university admissions should be minimized. The irony wasn't lost on Chloe. Her heart pounded as she scribbled notes furiously. Every word, every argument that came to mind felt personal, because she wasn't just debating a topic, she was debating her right to even stand in that room. After the session, students gathered in study groups, but no one invited Chloe. She found an empty corner in the library, opened her battered laptop, and began to research Supreme Court rulings, socioeconomic statistics, historic Eastwood admission biases. She absorbed it all. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mom. Mom, you got this, Chloe. Make him listen. Chloe smiled faintly, closed the message, and went back to work. Somewhere deep inside, a quiet resolve hardened. The morning of the first elimination round arrived, cold and gray. The Eastwood Debate Hall, with its tall Gothic arches and rows of polished mahogany benches, felt more like a courtroom than a classroom. Chloe stood at the side entrance, peeking in as the audience filed to their seats, students, professors, and even a few journalists covering the Invitational. The air buzzed with nervous energy and thinly veiled competition. Her name was listed dead last on the speaker roster, a position she knew all too well, left for afterthoughts and those considered unworthy of attention. She tightened her ponytail, adjusted the collar of her thrift store blazer, and stepped inside. Brandon Rivers, of course, was slotted first. He took the stage like he owned it. His voice boomed, his diction flawless. He wove statistics with personal anecdotes, punctuating arguments with calculated pauses that drew nods and light applause from the audience. When Brandon finished, the judges scribbled notes with smiles barely hidden behind their pens. The next few speakers followed, polished, confident, speaking with the practiced tone of students who'd spent years on the national circuit. Chloe listened carefully to each, mentally noting flaws, gaps, and weak assumptions. But with every passing speech, a knot tightened in her stomach. Then came her turn. Her name echoed awkwardly through the hall. Next speaker, Chloe Hayes, representing Oakwood Southeast Regional. A beat of uncomfortable silence followed. Chloe rose slowly. Every step toward the podium felt heavier than the last. She passed rows of students whispering into each other's ears. Some smiled, amused. Others just stared, waiting for her to crumble. Professor Vance sat at the judges' table, eyes fixed, unreadable. Chloe placed her notebook on the podium, her fingers trembling only slightly. She adjusted the mic, cleared her throat, and then she began. Her opening line was soft, but intentional. Before I begin, I'd like to thank Eastwood for this invitation. Even if some people in this room believe I shouldn't be here. The ripple of gasps and awkward laughter was immediate. She didn't pause. With deliberate clarity, she launched into her argument. She didn't have the polished oratory tricks Brandon flaunted, but she had something else, raw conviction. She spoke of systemic bias, of communities like hers where schools barely had functioning air conditioning, let alone debate programs. She quoted Supreme Court rulings, referenced longitudinal studies on socioeconomic impact on educational outcomes, and without warning, shifted into personal narrative. Some of us weren't born with legacy admission papers waiting for us, she said, locking eyes with Brandon mid-sentence. Some of us had to earn every single invitation, including this one. There was no applause yet, just a charged silence, the kind that demanded attention. When she reached her closing, reducing the impact of socioeconomic background in admissions isn't about charity. It's about fairness. It's about potential. And it's about making sure the next Chloe Hayes doesn't have to stand here proving she deserves a seat at a table she's already earned. Her voice didn't waver once. As she stepped down, the room stayed silent for a breath longer than necessary. Then scattered applause. Not overwhelming, but real. Brandon smirked sarcastically as she passed by him, muttering under his breath, "Cute speech. Let's see if it matters." But Chloe didn't respond. She walked straight past him, shoulders back, head high, because deep down she knew something had shifted. Later that afternoon, the preliminary scores were posted on the announcement board outside the debate hall. Chloe approached cautiously, her heart thumping in her chest. The rankings were neatly typed with the top 16 names moving on to the next round. Each name felt like a wall she'd need to climb. She scanned the list, her eyes darting frantically until they landed on hers. Chloe Hayes, ranked 12, just above the cutoff. A slow breath escaped her lips. Relief mingled with adrenaline. She wasn't at the top, but she wasn't eliminated either. She had survived the first culling. Behind her, Brandon's unmistakable voice rang out. "Well, look at that," he drawled, standing with two of his debate circle friends. "Miracles really do happen." Chloe didn't turn around. She knew better. As she walked away, she overheard more whispers. "Who is she again?" "She's from some public school in California, I think. This has to be a diversity pick. No way she actually scored above Alex or Priya." Chloe's stomach tightened, but again she kept moving. That evening, in her tiny dorm room assigned for out-of-state participants, she sprawled her research notes across the bed. The topic for the next round had just been emailed, resolved. Affirmative action policies do more harm than good. The irony tasted bitter. They were going to make her defend or challenge the very policy that might have been the only reason she'd gotten this invitation in the first place, at least in their eyes. For a few minutes, she just stared at her laptop screen. Her mind flooded with doubts. What if they were right? What if she was only here because of some checkbox? What if her next speech was her last? Her phone buzzed. Mom, remember, baby, you've never needed anyone's permission to be great. Chloe smiled faintly. With renewed determination, she opened a dozen research tabs at once: Supreme Court rulings on affirmative action, longitudinal studies on underrepresented student performance, personal testimonies from students like her. And then she went a step further. She started outlining arguments for both sides. If they wanted to trap her, she'd make sure she knew every possible way out. The next day, the debate hall felt even colder. Brandon was again scheduled before her. He took the floor with a smug grin, delivering a performance that blended cherry-picked statistics with carefully veiled sarcasm. We should admit students based on merit, he declared at one point, turning briefly toward Chloe's section in the audience, not on sympathy or social engineering. The audience chuckled politely. The judges smiled, jotting notes. By the time Chloe's name was called, the air was thick with expectation and skepticism. She rose, walked steadily to the podium, and began. Her voice was calm but unwavering. This conversation isn't about lowering standards, she said, locking eyes with the audience. It's about recognizing that the playing field hasn't been level for a long, long time. She didn't stop there. She cited historical data on legacy admissions, the percentage of Eastwood's student body that came from families in the top 1% income bracket, the invisible advantages baked into the system long before students ever filled out an application. And then she paused. If you believe that only grades and test scores should determine worth, she continued, then ask yourself how many of you sitting here today would be here without private tutors, elite prep schools, and parents who knew how to game the system before you could even spell. Pat? The room shifted uncomfortably. Some jaws tightened. A few students exchanged glances. Brandon's confident smirk began to waver. Chloe closed with quiet intensity. Leveling the playing field isn't about giving anyone a free pass. It's about making sure the next generation of thinkers and leaders doesn't look exactly like the last. When she stepped down, the applause came quicker this time, louder, not overwhelming, but undeniable. Professor Vance's eyes followed her as she returned to her seat. For the first time, there was something different in her gaze, not indifference, but recognition. The next day, Chloe's name appeared on the quarterfinal bracket. She had climbed higher than anyone expected, rank 7 now. Brandon still sitting comfortably at number 1. But this time something felt off. On her way to the dining hall, Chloe noticed 2 students from Brandon's debate circle huddled near the bulletin board, laughing quietly while glancing at her. As she walked past, one muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear, "Let's see how she handles tomorrow's topic." Her stomach twisted. That evening, as she prepped for the quarterfinals, an email popped up in her inbox. Subject: Revised topic assignment urgent from debate committee admin at eastwood.edu. The email looked official enough. Due to scheduling conflicts, your debate topic has been switched. Please prepare to argue the following resolution tomorrow. Resolved: the American education system rewards conformity over creativity. Failure to comply will result in disqualification. Panic surged. She scrolled back through the earlier official schedule. Nothing mentioned this change. None of the other competitors had reported any topic shifts. Her instincts screamed something wasn't right, but she didn't have time to question it. With barely 10 hours before her round, she shoved aside her previous prep and started over, researching, writing, rehearsing. By 2 a.m. her eyes burned, but her speech was done. She fell asleep with her laptop still open. The next morning, walking into the debate hall, she clutched her speech notes tightly. But as she approached the check-in table, Professor Vance called her name. "Miss Hayes, where have you been?" The professor's tone was sharp, almost annoyed. Chloe blinked, confused. I've been preparing for the topic change," the email said. Professor Vance's brows knitted. "What email?" Chloe opened her phone, showing the message. Professor Vance's lips thinned as she scanned the sender's address. "This isn't from us," she said coldly. "This is fake." Chloe's heart sank. Her hands trembled. Who would? Before she could finish, Vance cut her off. "You were supposed to prepare for the assigned topic. Resolved. Technology has eroded authentic human communication. And your round starts in 5 minutes. Chloe's stomach dropped. No prep, no research, no outline. Brandon, standing nearby, caught her eye. His smirk was unmistakable. He tilted his head slightly, mouthing silently across the room. Oops. Chloe's throat tightened. She had two choices, walk out or walk up. Her mother's voice rose in her memory, steady and unyielding. You didn't come this far to fold now. Chloe stood tall. With trembling but determined hands, she grabbed a blank notepad and a pen, sprinted to an empty corner, and began scribbling ideas at lightning speed. Technology, communication, erosion of authenticity. Okay, she could work with that. When her name was called, she walked to the podium, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear anything else. For a moment she closed her eyes, inhaled. Then she spoke. Her voice was shaky at first, but as she built momentum, clarity returned. She spoke from experience about how social media had twisted friendships back home, how screen addiction replaced real conversations at her school, how even here students were more interested in snap streaks than authentic dialogue. It wasn't her best researched speech, but it was raw, real, and by the end, it was powerful. As she stepped down, Brandon's smile faded just a little. Professor Vance didn't clap, but her gaze lingered on Chloe longer than it ever had. Back in her room that night, Chloe stared at her phone. No new emails, no new threats. But she knew this wasn't over. There were games being played, and she'd just proven she could play too. The next morning, Chloe sat on the stone steps outside the debate hall, sipping lukewarm coffee from a vending machine cup. The autumn air was crisp, but her mind was burning with questions. Who had sent that fake email, and why had no one officially addressed it? Her phone buzzed with a notification, quarterfinal results posted. She walked briskly to the bulletin board, heart pounding. Chloe Hayes, rank 5, advancing to semifinals. A small gasp escaped her lips. Even after the sabotage, she had made it. A few heads turned at her reaction. Brandon stood nearby with his friends, jaw tightening ever so slightly when he saw her name on the list. That afternoon, while reviewing her notes in the library, a shadow fell across her desk. Chloe looked up. Professor Vance. Without sitting, Vance lowered her voice. Miss Hayes, I'd like to speak with you privately. Chloe's heart skipped. They walked together to Vance's small office down the hall. The walls were lined with debate trophies and framed photos from past Eastwood champions. Vance motioned for her to sit. I reviewed the email you received, she began. It was spoofed. The sender masked their address to make it look like an official Eastwood account. Chloe felt her throat tighten. Do you know who sent it? Vance's gaze narrowed. Not yet, but I've made the administration aware. And for now, keep your head down. Chloe's fists clenched slightly on her lap. I don't want to keep my head down, Professor. Someone tried to sabotage me. Vance leaned back, eyes unreadable. I admire your spirit, but understand, this place eats the reckless alive. There was a long pause. Finally, Vance's voice softened just a fraction. Make it to the finals, then we'll talk. With that, the meeting ended. That night, Chloe stayed up late in the dorm lounge. Headphones on, blocking out the world. The semi-final topic had just been released, resolved. Social movements driven by digital activism are less effective than traditional grassroots organizing. Perfect. This was her territory. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, pulling data from case studies on Black Lives Matter, the Arab Spring, even Hurricane Oakwood relief efforts back home. Her personal connection to the subject burned through every note she typed. But even as she prepared, she couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. The day of the semifinals arrived. Chloe's opponent, Mia Chin, ranked second from a prestigious private academy in Springfield with a debate resume longer than most people's college applications. As they faced each other on stage, Mia offered a polite smile, but there was no warmth behind it. The debate began. Mia opened strong, calculated points, strategic takedowns, polished transitions. But when Chloe took the mic, she turned the room. She spoke of lived experience, of watching online petitions translate into real-world policy changes in her own neighborhood, of how digital activism had become the only megaphone for marginalized voices. Her voice wavered only once when she mentioned the loss of her uncle during post-Katrina recovery efforts and how online fundraisers had been the only reason her family could rebuild. The room fell silent at that moment. By the end, even Mia seemed shaken. When the judges returned with their decision, the announcement rang out, the winner advancing to the final round. Chloe Hayes. The applause was scattered, hesitant. But it didn't matter. She'd done it. From a forgotten name at the bottom of the list to a finalist at Eastwood. But as Chloe walked off stage, Professor Vance approached quietly, her face unreadable. "Be ready," she said lowly. "The next round won't just test your skill." And just behind her, Brandon Rivers stood, leaning against the wall, arms crossed, eyes narrowing, because in the final, it would be Chloe versus Brandon, and both knew there was more at stake than a trophy. The morning of the final round dawned colder than any day before. Heavy gray clouds hung low over Eastwood's campus as if the sky itself understood the weight of what was coming. Snyder Auditorium was packed. Faculty, alumni, students, even a few regional reporters had shown up to cover the event. Cameras lined the back wall. The Eastwood Debate Invitational wasn't usually this high profile, but word had spread quickly over the past week. The farm girl versus Eastwood royalty narrative was too good to ignore. Chloe sat backstage, flipping through her notebook. Her heart thudded in her chest, but her breathing stayed even. Years of late-night speeches in her bedroom mirror had prepared her for this. Across the room, Brandon Rivers paced confidently. His friends clustered around him like groupies, offering high fives and last-minute pep talks. Chloe caught snippets of his voice. "Easy win. Just got to bury her under cross-exam. She'll crack. No way she's ready for this level." But she didn't flinch. Professor Vance approached her quietly. "You're about to step into a room that wasn't built for you," Vance said, voice low. "But make no mistake, you've earned every second of this stage." Chloe nodded. The debate topic was already displayed on the main screen. Resolved, traditional institutions remain the best guardians of academic integrity. The irony was thick. Chloe almost smiled. The auditorium fell silent as the moderator took the stage. "Welcome to the final round of the Eastwood National Invitational. Representing Eastwood's Honor Division, Brandon Rivers. Representing the Southeast Regional Public Forum, Chloe Hayes." Applause erupted, but Chloe couldn't help noticing Brandon's side of the room was louder. The moderator explained the rules. Each speaker would deliver an opening statement followed by cross-examinations, rebuttals, and closing arguments. Brandon went first and he came out swinging. He painted a picture of Eastwood and other elite institutions as guardians of knowledge, traditions, and fairness. He referenced decades of academic research, surveys on institutional trust, even quoted a former Secretary of Education. His delivery was sharp, charismatic, and dripping with confidence. The audience ate it up. When it was Chloe's turn, she stepped forward slowly. Her palms tingled with adrenaline, but her voice was steady. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we're here today to debate who gets to decide what's considered academic integrity." She paused, making eye contact with the judges, with the audience, with Brandon himself. "And I stand here as living proof that sometimes the very institutions we trust are the first to silence voices like mine." A visible ripple moved through the audience. She didn't stop. Chloe spoke of the fake email sabotage without naming names but making it clear that institutional gatekeeping wasn't just theoretical. It was happening right here, right now. She referenced historical examples, how universities once barred women, then people of color, then anyone who didn't fit a narrow mold of what qualified looked like. Her voice rose with conviction. Integrity isn't just about preserving traditions. It's about evolving past the ones that kept people out. Cross-examination followed. Brandon attacked aggressively. He questioned her statistics, pushed her on definitions, interrupted her points. But Chloe stayed calm. For every jab, she countered with clarity. "You're shifting the argument, Mr. Rivers," she said at one point, voice cool. "Let's return to the resolution." The crowd stirred. Even some faculty members leaned forward, intrigued. In the rebuttal phase, Chloe dismantled Brandon's core argument. "If traditional institutions were flawless guardians of integrity, I wouldn't have had to fight my way through sabotage just to stand here today." Her words hung in the air. For the first time all tournament, Brandon's confident facade cracked. His smile faded. His rebuttal came across rushed, defensive. When the debate concluded, the auditorium sat in charged silence. Then applause. This time it wasn't scattered. It was real, full, loud. Chloe stepped back from the podium, breath shaking. Brandon stared at the floor, jaw tight, refusing to look at her. Professor Vance, standing near the judge's table, gave Chloe the faintest nod, but the final decision hadn't been announced yet. Both debaters were escorted backstage to await the results. As Chloe sat in the hallway staring at her worn sneakers, one thought repeated in her mind: win or lose, I made them listen. Chloe sat on the cold bench outside the auditorium, hands trembling despite her best efforts to stay composed. The minutes dragged. From the hallway, she could faintly hear the muffled voices of the judges deliberating behind closed doors. Laughter erupted briefly, then silence, then more murmurs. Her stomach churned. Brandon paced a few feet away, arms crossed, eyes dark with frustration. His earlier cocky swagger was gone, replaced by a nervous tension he couldn't hide. Chloe glanced at him, but he didn't meet her gaze. Finally, the door opened. Professor Vance stepped out, her face carefully neutral. The results will be announced in 5 minutes, she said, motioning both students back inside. Chloe's heart pounded in her chest as she re-entered Snyder Auditorium. The crowd was buzzing now. Phones were out. Students whispered predictions to each other. Brandon's friends sat front row wearing identical Eastwood blue sweaters. Chloe's section almost empty except for a few out-of-state competitors she'd befriended and a single camera crew from a local news outlet. The moderator took the stage, holding a sealed envelope. Chloe held her breath. After much deliberation, the moderator began. The judges have reached a decision. He opened the envelope slowly with dramatic pause. The winner of the 2023 Eastwood National Invitational is a beat. Chloe Hayes. The room froze. For one heart-stopping second, Chloe wondered if she'd heard it wrong. Then applause erupted. Not just polite, obligatory clapping, but real, genuine applause from parts of the room she hadn't expected. Some students stood, others simply stared in disbelief. Brandon's face turned pale. He didn't wait for the official congratulations. Without a word, he grabbed his bag and stormed out through the side exit. Chloe stood still, too shocked to move. Professor Vance approached, holding out her hand. Chloe shook it, her fingers trembling. Well done, Vance said, voice low but sincere. You didn't just win a debate. You proved you belong here. As cameras flashed and people surged forward to shake her hand, Chloe's phone buzzed. A text from her mom. Mom told you, baby, you never needed their permission to shine. Chloe blinked back sudden tears. She took a deep breath, lifted her chin, and smiled for the first time in days, wide, unguarded, and full of something that had been missing, pride. Later that evening, Chloe sat alone on the steps outside the hall, the crisp night air wrapping around her like a familiar friend. A shadow approached. Professor Vance. I thought you'd like to know, Vance said quietly, sitting beside her. The administration found out who sent that fake email. Chloe's breath caught. Who? Vance's lips curled into something between satisfaction and regret. Brandon Rivers. The evidence was undeniable. Is he? Chloe began. Facing disciplinary review, Vance finished. Nothing public yet. Eastwood protects its own, but off the record, his chances at future national competitions gone. Chloe exhaled slowly. I didn't want it to end like this, she whispered. Vance nodded. I know, but you handled it with more grace than most adults I know. They sat there in silence for a moment longer, staring at the distant lights of the campus. The battle was over. But Chloe knew her real journey was only just beginning. Because for the first time, Eastwood would remember her name. And for the first time, the girl from Oakwood wasn't just fighting to be heard. She was here to stay. Weeks later, back in Oakwood, Chloe sat on her front porch, sipping sweet tea as the sun set over the neighborhood. Her mom stepped outside, holding an envelope with Eastwood's letterhead. Chloe opened it carefully. Inside, an official invitation to join Eastwood's summer pre-law program, full scholarship with a personal note from Professor Vance herself. Can't wait to see how far you'll go, it read. Chloe smiled, her heart full. From being doubted to being welcomed. From fighting for a voice to standing as proof that voices like hers could change rooms, challenge systems, and crack the ceilings others pretended didn't exist. And dear friend, if this story moved you even just a little, if you believe that talent, resilience, and heart can come from anywhere, please give this video a thumbs up. Drop a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button to help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers. because with your support, we'll keep bringing you more true inspired stories like this. Stories that prove sometimes it's not where you start, it's how loud you are.